The plant that cost me the most time in my entire gardening life came in a 4-inch pot in April. It was already blooming. The tag said, "Spreading habit, deer-resistant, attracts pollinators." All three of those statements were accurate. What the tag did not say was that within 5 years, I would spend an entire long weekend with a digging fork and a pile of contractor bags trying to remove it, and that the following spring it would come back anyway from the root fragments I missed. What the tag did not say was that one division from that original plant had crossed under the fence into my neighbor's yard and was coming up in her vegetable bed. What the tag did not say was that I was going to be managing the consequences of that $8 purchase for the next decade. I have been making gardening mistakes for 30 years. Some of them were genuine experiments that did not work out. Some were purchases based on information that turned out to be incomplete. And some were plants I bought because they looked beautiful in the garden center in April, and because nobody who worked there told me what April beautiful sometimes looks like by the 5th June. This list is the mistakes. Not all of them. There are more than 13 if I'm being completely honest. But these 13 are the ones I hear about most consistently from gardeners who have been through the same experience. The ones that fill comment sections and letters and conversations at garden club meetings with the same story told in different yards across different states. For every one, I'm giving you what I plant instead. Not a consolation plant, a better plant. One that does the same design job, attracts the same wildlife, fills the same garden role, and stays where you put it without requiring intervention every spring for the foreseeable future. Drop your state in the comments before we go further. Several plants on this list are invasive in specific states and completely manageable in others. Where you garden determines the actual risk level of every plant we discuss today. Number 13 is mountain bluet. The blue was what got me. That specific shade of cornflower blue that the honeybees locate before the morning light has fully settled. There is almost nothing like it in the May border. A friend offered me a single division from her garden, which is how this story almost always begins, and I planted it in the corner near the gate, where it bloomed beautifully for 2 weeks, before becoming a collection of brown, ragged sticks for the remainder of the season. The following spring, there were 11 plants. I had planted 1. The original had seeded into the gravel path, into the joints between patio stones, into the lawn 12 feet from the original planting. The seedlings come up looking identical to the parent, and they produce the same beautiful 2 weeks of bloom in May, before becoming the same brown, ragged sticks in June. Except now there are a dozen of them competing with plants I actually intended to grow in those spaces. Connecticut classifies mountain bluet as potentially invasive and has banned it from sale. Washington State lists it as a regulated plant. What I grow instead is catmint Walker's Low, Nepeta racemosa. Same blue-purple color family, same consistent bee traffic from early morning, same approximate height and habit. Blooms from late spring through fall, rather than for 2 weeks in May. Completely sterile. Plant 1, you have 1 the following season. It was the Perennial Plant of the Year in 2007, and earned that recognition through documented multi-climate garden performance. 1 plant, not 11. Number 12 is lamb's ear. My grandmother grew a long swath of them along her front walk and let me drag my hand across the leaves when I was small. I planted them in my own garden for that reason, for a memory. And memory is among the worst possible reasons to put a plant in a permanent bed. The silver rosettes looked magnificent for 3 weeks in late May. Then the first thunderstorm arrives. The leaves flatten to the ground, wet and matted. and they do not stand back up. By July, the planting is sodden and gray. By August, it is a brown mat you are pulling out by the handful. And underneath that mat, you find stolons running, white, tough, already crossing under the iris bed and into the salvia clump. What I plant instead is Artemisia silvermound, Artemisia schmittiana. Fine thread-like silver foliage in a clean mounded form that does not collapse in rain, does not spread by stolons, stays precisely where you put it from spring through fall. A 5-year-old could still run a hand across it. Same tactile quality, same silver color, none of the August regret. Number 11 is sweet woodruff. This one is genuinely difficult to talk about because I still love it. The fragrance, fresh hay and vanilla, intensifying when you step on a patch in rain or crush a leaf in your hand, is one of the finest things any plant produces. The tiny white star flowers under deciduous trees in May look exactly like a romantic gardening book cover from the 1940s. The Germans dry it for May wine. The entire sensory experience of this plant is extraordinary. I planted a single 1-gallon pot under the porch corner where nothing else cooperated. 5 years later, it had covered 400 square feet. 10 years later, it was emerging under the foundation. When I finally gave up and laid rubberized weed cloth over the entire area, it grew on top of the cloth. Sweet woodruff is not on most invasive plant lists because most botanists classify it as garden confined. In a real garden, it confines itself the way a fire confines itself to a single room. What grows there now is wild ginger, Asarum canadense, native, shade-tolerant, heart-shaped glossy leaves that spread slowly enough that you can actually remove a section when you need to. It will not smell like May wine. It will not come up under your foundation. There are trades worth making. Number 10 is Sedum autumn joy. It is in every perennial bed in America, and I understand why. The broccoli pink flower heads that turn dusty rose and then warm copper through September and October photograph beautifully at the exact time of year when everything else in the border has stopped performing. The catalog editors love it. The first 2 seasons, I loved it. The 3rd year, the stems began weakening in July. By the 4th year, the flower heads were tilting outward by August, the whole planting collapsing outward from the center like a flower arrangement in warm water. The center of each clump opens into a ring. Rain fills the hollow, and the plant that was supposed to anchor the late-season border looks instead like something went wrong. You can stake it. You can cut it back hard in June to reduce the leverage the flower heads exert on weakening stems. You can divide every 2 years to reset the center growth. Or you can plant Sedum matrona. Same genus, same late-season interest, significantly stiffer stems that hold the flower heads upright through frost without intervention. Same job, same season, no management. That is the correct exchange. Number 9 is forget-me-not. 5 petals, a yellow eye at the center, blooming under the lilac in May in exactly the way my grandmother described them for years before I grew them myself. A woman named Sandy wrote in the comments that eliminating hers took 5 full years of consistent digging. She called it one of the worst gardening mistakes she ever made. She was not being dramatic. This is a short-lived perennial that operates like an invasive one. It blooms in May and sets seed in June. The seeds have a Velcro-like texture that adheres to clothing, to the dog's coat, to every surface they contact. The following April produces hundreds of seedlings emerging across the bed, in the crowns of newly planted perennial divisions. in the spacing around spring bulbs, in every gap you planned for something specific. They do not compete with established plants. They overwhelm everything that is not yet established. What I plant instead is Brunera Jack Frost, Brunera macrophylla. Tiny blue flowers in May, same 5 petals, same yellow eye, indistinguishable at any distance from forget-me-not in bloom. Below those flowers, heart-shaped silver-veined leaves that remain beautiful through the entire growing season, long after forget-me-not has become a seeding problem you are managing rather than a plant you are enjoying. Clump forming. Does not seed aggressively. Does not adhere to the dog. It was the Perennial Plant of the Year in 2012, and the catalogs got that one right. Number 8 is Crocosmia lucifer. The red is the kind hummingbirds locate from serious distance. Tall, arching stems, upright, sword-shaped foliage, blooming July through late August in a color vivid enough to read from across the street. I bought 3 plants from a roadside nursery and put them along the west fence. And for 2 seasons, the planting performed exactly as dramatically and as beautifully as every photograph of it suggested it would. By year 4, there were 40 plants in a clump 12 feet wide. I dug them, or believed I had dug them. Every corm the size of a marble that I missed, and there were dozens of them layered 6 inches deep, sprouted the following spring. I have been working that fence line for 15 years and still find new growth in June. California, Oregon, and Washington list the species as invasive in certain habitats. The plant that does the same job without the consequence is red-hot poker, Cnifophia. The variety flamenco delivers the same tropical visual drama, the same hummingbird traffic, from clumps that expand slowly and stay where you planted them. Cut spent flower spikes in August. That is the entirety of the management required. Number 7 is old variety garden phlox. The first August with old garden phlox, it was everything I had wanted. Pale lavender, intensely fragrant, 4 feet tall, exactly like the plant my mother grew when I was young. The second August, I noticed a gray-white coating on the lower leaves. By Labor Day, the leaves had dropped from the stems, leaving bare stalks topped with flower heads. The visual signature of powdery mildew moving through a susceptible variety in cool, humid late summer conditions. The old varieties, Bright Eyes, Robert Poor, Mount Fuji, were bred before mildew resistance was a selection criterion. They catch it every year without exception in humid climates, unless you spray preventatively through August. Most catalogs still sell them. No catalog I have found warns you that annual spraying is the price of growing them. What I plant instead is Phlox David. Pure white, 4 feet tall, blooming August through September. The Mount Cuba Center in Delaware, which runs the most rigorous perennial trial program in the country, placed David at the top of multi-year mildew resistance evaluations. It was Perennial Plant of the Year in 2002. There is also Gina, a pink variety with even stronger resistance, and exceptional butterfly attraction documented in the same trials. Plant either one. Do not buy the old varieties. The catalog will not tell you the difference. This does. 7 down, 6 remaining. Every plant in this half has a specific documented problem beyond simply spreading. Toxicity, structural invasiveness, or consequences that outlast the gardener who planted them. One alternative for each one. Every alternative does the same garden job without the problem that comes with it. Number 6 is Snow in Summer. 3 weeks of genuinely beautiful white flowers in May, then a brown dead ring in the center by July, while the stolons keep running outward into the path, the lawn, and the dianthus next to it. What I plant instead is Dianthus firewitch, silver-gray mat, magenta-pink fringed flowers in May and again in fall, completely stationary. Perennial plant of the year 2006. Stays exactly where you planted it. No bare center, no running. Number 5 is tansy. Yellow button flowers, cottage garden romance, and enough thujone in the leaves to kill a horse and seriously sicken a dog. Washington, Colorado, and Montana classify it as a noxious weed. What I grow instead is yarrow moonshine. Same sulfur yellow, ferny silver foliage. Blooms June through September, zero toxicity, and the pollinators prefer it. Number 4 is ostrich fern. Beautiful fiddleheads in May and rhizomes that travel a foot per year and cross under foundations. I planted one division. 15 years later, it was coming up on the other side of the house. What I plant in that spot now is Japanese painted fern, silver and burgundy fronds, clump forming, expanding a few inches per year. Perennial plant of the year 2004. Same shade, same fern quality, stays put. Number 3 is mint. Every gardener does this once. 4-inch pot in May for summer tea. Within 2 seasons, it has crossed the basil, taken over the parsley, and come up in the lawn 3 feet away through white stolons that break when you try to pull them, and regenerate from every fragment. The contained pot sunk in the ground method works until a runner creeps over the rim, which it will. What I plant instead is anise hyssop, tall lavender spikes, leaves that smell of licorice and mint, bees and hummingbirds working it all season, reseeds gently, never runs. Number 2 is Mexican petunia. If you garden in zones 8 through 11, you have seen it on every garden center bench. Purple trumpet flowers from May through frost, handles heat, handles drought, asks for nothing. Florida classifies it as a Category 1 invasive. A woman named Pam wrote in the comments that she once declined to buy a house she loved because the backyard had a Mexican petunia thicket that would have required a bulldozer. That is not exaggeration. There is a sterile cultivar called Mayan, but the labels rarely specify which one you are purchasing. Ask before you buy. What I plant instead is Salvia black and blue. True cobalt blue tubular flowers, 4 feet tall, hummingbird magnet, clump forming, does not escape, does not become a regulated weed in the state where you live. Number 1 is Star of Bethlehem. 6 white petals, green stripe down the back of each one, delicate spray of star flowers in late April. It came over with European settlers in the 1700s and has been spreading through American gardens since. Cornell, Penn State, Rutgers, and Ohio State have all published extension warnings about this bulb. The warnings have not slowed catalog sales. Every part is toxic. Cardiac glycosides, the same family as foxglove and oleander, concentrated most heavily in the bulb. Children have been poisoned. Dogs have died. The bulbs reproduce by offset. The original makes a dozen daughters per season. You cannot pull them cleanly. The bulb breaks at the neck, and the daughters stay in the ground and continue the cycle. The previous owner of my house planted some. I am still digging them out of beds I have not planted in years. What I plant instead is Siberian iris, slender upright foliage, blue or purple or white flowers in May, Clump forming, completely non-toxic, deer-resistant. Plant a clump, and it lives in the same spot in the same shape for the rest of your gardening life. Nobody who inherits that garden inherits a problem. 13 plants, 13 better alternatives. Drop your state in the comments and tell me which one you are still digging out. I read every one.